there was a man walking on the beach, and he came upon a stretch of the beach that was covered with starfish all over the beach, up out of the water. And there was a small boy standing there, and he was throwing the starfish, one at a time, back into the ocean. But there were millions of starfish. And the man said, "What good could this possibly do, young man? Throwing one starfish at a time, look at them all." The boy reached down, he picked it up, and he said, "It's going to make a lot of difference to this one."
All right.
These Santa Cruz citizens are struggling to resolve one of their most pressing community needs, affordable housing. For 2 years, local leaders have tried in vain to develop an approach that would satisfy their diverse interests. Today, they are joined by a broad cross-section of county residents in a future search conference. They have decided to involve citizens from one end of the county to the other in discovering how much common ground exists on housing and many other related issues. During the Future Search Conference, you will see them discover shared aspirations as they recreate 30 years of history in the world, in their own lives, and in the community. You'll watch them inventory what they already are doing about current trends in housing, employment, education, and many other themes. And you'll see what happens when they project themselves 10 years into the future to dramatize the community they really want and how they plan to get there. Before the conference ends, you'll witness the citizens of Santa Cruz County planning a variety of actions together that previously none of them could do alone. At the end of the video, we'll give you a progress report on Santa Cruz 18 months after the conference. Housing was not always a problem in Santa Cruz County. In 1960, the county was loosely divided into 2 areas, a small retirement community around the city of Santa Cruz and an agricultural community around the town of Watsonville. The county population was approximately 25,000 people. In the late 60s, the University of California opened their Santa Cruz campus, creating housing needs for thousands of people. At the same time, with its beautiful scenery and idyllic climate, the Santa Cruz area became a bedroom community for wealthy Silicon Valley executives. By 1990, the population had grown 1,000% to 250,000 people. Real estate prices were driven out of reach of the native residents. Most retired residents had fixed incomes, and many other people were left unemployed by the 1990 recession. Then, in 1992, a major earthquake centered in Santa Cruz turned an already serious housing problem into a community crisis.
We see that this community is in dire need for affordable housing for many, many, many people.
They live in housing with several families. They live in garages. The people who live in the community that work in agriculture, work in tourism, were kind of priced out of the housing market.
So it's very difficult. If a person is making even $7 an hour with 3 children, it's very difficult to afford housing.
The county had an active funding agency, the Greater Santa Cruz County Community Foundation. Their mission was to create a funding base to finance community action. Despite several leadership conferences, nobody could formulate a plan with broad support. Grace Jepson, the foundation's executive director, had heard of a future search. She encouraged the use of a Ford Foundation grant for a future search on affordable housing. The hope was to bring all segments of Santa Cruz County together in a new way. After months of planning, 72 diverse citizens are assembled at a local conference center for a meeting that will occupy them for 3 days. Participants will work together to develop a shared appreciation of Santa Cruz and its housing dilemmas. After a brief introduction by Grace Jepson and an orientation by the facilitators, the participants begin meeting each other at mixed tables. Each table is a cross-section of the whole conference. Everyone was asked to bring items that symbolize life in Santa Cruz.
Together representing the fact that all of us probably move in different circles. We don't all know one another, but nevertheless we're linked.
The whole rests on a rock, which represents democracy. It is a little crumbled around the edges, but it is nevertheless firm.
Sitting at mixed tables, they soon discover one of the most important features of this event, the opportunity to work with concerned people they might otherwise never meet.
The striking immediacy when I arrived was the vast array of people in the community that were present.
I was particularly impressed that two young people, young men, were invited to participate.
There were people, you know, my age, older, more mature, people that were elderly people, and I think that was very important to have them mix.
The diversity of the conference was no accident. It resulted from several months of weekly meetings and careful planning by a volunteer steering committee. The committee spent considerable time defining the purpose of the conference and deciding who was needed to accomplish it. The purpose was embodied in the conference title.
What would the title be? How would we convey our message to the other 72 participants in the community to get them to come and do this with us?
We wanted to make sure that we included both the metaphor of housing as the idea, but not so literal that people had to think that they had to come there to solve some particular problem in some very particular way.
They called the conference Coming Together as a Community Around Housing, a search for our future in Santa Cruz County. The committee understood that housing linked to every person in the community. It would be difficult to do anything about the problem working only with housing experts.
So it allowed us to bring educators in, people from churches, all kinds of nonprofit organizations, and the broadest cross-section of folks who cared about their community.
The planning committee devised an ingenious selection process using a vertical slice community matrix. The graph ensured the inclusion of a wide spectrum of residents and diverse viewpoints.
But we were trying to mirror with the stakeholders this community.
So every table was integrated, so to speak. So like if you had the business table, it not only had people who ran businesses, it had people who worked in businesses. If you separated the tables out, so people who ran businesses sat at one table, separate from people who worked in businesses, you would be doing just exactly what happens in the world. You're not forcing yourself to see it another way.
The vertical slice became a commitment on the part of the staff and the planning group that we would make sure in the selection of all the stakeholders that we had represented all segments of our community.
As a result, every table is filled and people are curious as to how such a large group will work together. To establish a common ground for learning, participants are asked to create a shared portrait of the last 30 years. When they're ready, they transfer their work to 3 timelines on the walls. One personal, one global, and one for Santa Cruz County. Having recorded their recollections, participants combine the timelines on one wall where they can be seen together. Each mixed group compiles a history based on one of the timelines. The purpose of this activity is to build a community where people appreciate their different backgrounds. They also recognize that they live in the same world and share many similar aspirations.
The events that had made us who we were kept coming back.
It was very striking to me to recognize how I go about my life sometimes expecting that other people see the world the way I do, and that the significant things that have happened in the country's history we all share as significant issues.
Another core principle of this conference is that each group self-manages its work, selecting its own recorder, timekeeper, and spokesperson.
We put people together on a very level playing field where each one of the people at the table had a chance to be a leader in the group.
As they reflect on their common past, there is both hope and frustration.
A lot of the changes that happened in the 60s were more sort of from the inside out, and a lot of the changes that are happening in the 90s are like from the outside, global events, things that people feel little control over.
The U.S. in the 60s was a creditor nation, and now in the 90s we're a debtor nation.
The economic recession we've been talking about is worldwide. All the industrialized nations, some of the ones in Europe, have greater unemployment than we do.
The generation that had the 60s, you know, is forcing it down the throats of everyone who wasn't there. You know, because you're all in positions of power now, and we have to hear about the 60s, and it's totally irrelevant for anybody born, you know, after about 1960.
The participants now turn to the present situation. The entire group identifies current trends in society that are impacting on Santa Cruz County. As people call out trends, the facilitators write them up, taking guidance from each contributor on the wording and location.
That's how we know all this depressing stuff is going on.
Bye-bye to the wasps.
Excessive school dropout rates.
In agriculture, from migrant workers to year-round workers, and which increases the housing need.
Decreased public funding to solve societal problems.
The increase in home-based businesses to compensate for the decrease in jobs.
The result is a large amoeba-like diagram called a mind map. It represents present trends as experienced by this group. Everybody participates, and everybody can see what their collective present looks like. The more diverse the group, the more comprehensive the map. People begin to see connections between their varied concerns.
So you begin to see all the kinds of global and national forces that have bring to bear on everybody's community.
And what one person would raise as an issue, someone would add to, and another person would add to, another person would add to.
There were a couple of things that I contributed to it that I thought everybody in the county knew about. And to listen to people talk or respond to my input was, oh, really?
When the group has exhausted all of the possible trends, they approach the map. Using colored stickers to represent their stakeholder group, they are asked to identify individually the trends that they think are most important for the future. They can quickly see the extent to which others share their concerns. The session ends for the day, setting the stage for discussing and accepting responsibility for action. In the morning, the group picks up its discussion of the mind map and the key trends. Reactions to the map cover a broad spectrum.
They make us look at things in a society that we really do not want to look at, and that's why it keeps hitting us in the face.
How amazingly hard it is for people to get along with one another.
Particularly in America, we have never had a flourishing economy that was not stimulated either by war or war production. And I think now we're being forced now to look at some alternative to how we have a flourishing economy that addresses all these issues.
It's like a snake eating its tail. The lack of jobs means poverty, means crime, means people dropping out of school, not education, and we're trying. I think what we're really at a quandary about is how to treat this globally rather than trying to patch Band-Aids on it.
To begin work on this quandary, people now sit together in stakeholder groups. Stakeholder groups consist of people with the same functional relationship to the community. For example, people from funding agencies sit at one table, while people from the business community sit at another. In their new groups, they reinterpret the map, identifying the trends that matter most to them. They ask themselves what they are doing about these trends now and what they would like to do in the future. Later, in an open forum, participants deepen their dialogue. By comparing definitions, they are learning to speak with a shared frame of reference.
I like the way we've been building for consensus and being easy on each other and all this other kind of stuff, and I think that it runs the danger, though, and I don't know if it comes back together, of us all leaving here saying the same thing, meaning different things.
At last they ask, What do we mean by affordable housing?
I check into affordable housing, I can't afford it. So I'm just wondering, what is affordable housing?
To allow a person, say, in a $30,000 income range to purchase a house. And that house would be deemed affordable if it comes in under the typical price of housing in that particular area. Considered affordable as opposed to low income.
I keep hearing affordable, but I never hear low income.
Yeah.
Finally, somebody articulates the critical issues.
Important conflict here, and it's a big contradiction on all of us, is that we want to we want to think about making all these changes, we want to bring about all these beautiful things to this area. But the truth is that we want to keep this place the way it is. How are we going to get away from the idealism and the beauty of the ideology and think a little bit more on a practical matter?
Now participants turn away from external trends toward a deeper awareness of what they feel. Each stakeholder group records what they are proud of and what they are sorry for in their own efforts to improve Santa Cruz County. This activity encourages people to take responsibility rather than blame others.
We have three of our proudest prouds. Our first is that each of us takes pride in her or his individual job and in the outcomes that we see as we work in wherever it is we're working in the county, in the areas of education, law, medicine, and mental health. We're proud of our generous volunteerism. We feel that we donate hours upon hours in the areas of women and children, youth in schools, and domestic violence.
We're proud of the emphasis that some of us have had in creating community within the housing projects that have been done. Proud of the empowering of people to help each other. Proud of forming new partnerships. We're sorry that that sometimes when we think we're helping, we're creating dependence.
But if we'd just been out there on the edge a little faster, a little sooner, maybe we could have made a bigger difference.
Again, after hearing from each group, all 72 people engage in a dialogue on what they heard and what they learned.
At all the tables, there seemed to be consensus about a high level of involvement in the communities.
In the national scene, what's happening the biggest this year is healthcare. We've hardly opened our mouths about it, and I think that what that means is that with imperfections included, Santa Cruz County is doing pretty well at providing that service for everybody.
Now it's time to turn toward the future. Several groups, each a cross-section of the community, imagine Santa Cruz County in the year 2004. They describe how people are living and working, noting concrete details they believe are feasible, desirable, and personally motivating. Then, placing themselves in the future, they dramatize what life is like, using whatever forms they wish. The dramas span a wide spectrum, from a future city supervisors meeting.
Finally, very important, we've caused a housing complex to be built.
To a parody of the PBS Mr. Rogers series.
We're going for a little ride in somebody else's neighborhood. We're going to go to Santa Cruz County.
One group created an ode to Santa Cruz.
The county came into my heart today, white and black and brown and yellow.
While another issued a declaration of interdependence.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all species are necessary parts of the whole mosaic of life.
Going along with this playfulness and creativity is an undercurrent of serious hopes and aspirations for the future.
Santa Cruz County's been able to create job incubation centers. As you travel down our transportation corridors, you'll see cottage industries springing up.
Anybody who wants to work and make a livable wage.
There are jobs in Santa Cruz County.
Agriculture is still our #1 industry.
Farm workers have organized themselves and have built these cooperatives that are producing organic food.
Rather than a bedroom community, we are becoming a bed and breakfast community.
I've finally been able to convince the community to declare this week
60s Remembrance Week.
The final activity of the second day is for all of the participants to identify from the scenarios common themes, potential projects, and unresolved differences. The mixed groups generate lists which are gradually merged until all the themes have been consolidated. Once the lists are posted, the group is done for the day. The next morning, the whole group reviews the lists again. The facilitators ask people to confirm what they are agreeing upon.
Is this our common future?
Yes.
So that all of the action is in the direction of these values.
In a discussion that follows, each statement is examined.
Cooperative governments, plural. And if their government was smaller and they're closer to their governance.
The recreation and the arts was really valuable to the community.
The mass transit, I don't disagree with, but we've certainly heard from a lot of people that light rail line that probably people were thinking of goes through everybody's backyard.
Any item that stirs up disagreement is reported as an unresolved difference, endorsed by some, but not all. The facilitators encourage a full exploration of what people are actually saying to each other.
We're about to step over the line from talk to action and to say, I personally want to take some responsibility to do something about some of this stuff. So we need to talk enough to say, am I ready to commit myself to some line of action here and see if I can find some allies.
I mean, if we just say ag preservation, I mean, that feels good, right? I mean, we want to live in a future where there's plenty of ag land and it's prosperous and it's producing a lot of food.
You know, the birds don't have anywhere in any sanctuaries and all the stuff, you know, because they're destroying wetlands and all. So it's not just agriculture. I think it has as much to do with land use.
There are a lot of you want to do things together on these other issues. We have not resolved this stickiest issue in a way that we can put into language that satisfies everybody.
In this group, the moment of truth comes after agreeing on almost all of the issues.
People have different ideas of what's acceptable as far as low-income housing.
Rich people aren't necessarily polluted by the presence of poor people in their neighborhood.
There's some very interesting things that have come up here about environmentalism being a middle-class white value that has basically reigned in this community for a long, long time.
You know, you're setting a tone which you think is the way things are, and I don't agree with what you just said.
Leave out the integration issue for now because that may not be something that everyone really does agree on.
I'm not willing to accept that the way it is. I mean, I understand the neighborhood barrier issue a lot.
We have to make some compromises on these other issues. We've got to create the space to build enough of the various kinds of houses that we've talked about.
The reality of the way this works, and I think we need to deal with some reality, is that if you try to put large projects in almost any neighborhood, and I don't care if there's already large projects there, those people don't want more large projects. It always has a neighborhood barrier issue.
Some people are saying those complaints. I face a whole group of different kind of people, needing housing every day. Telling me where they live, look at them, how they live in garages.
We have too damn many people, and they have to live somewhere, you know. And there are people that have that are two people in a 50,000 square foot house, you know, with 30 acres around them, and then we have to worry about squeezing somebody up against each other.
You know, I'm willing to work for certain types of projects, not just any low-income housing project, because I'm not willing to do that. So that's why I kind of brought it up. And if it wants to stay the way it is, and I think there is some disagreement, that's fine with me. But
There's some people here who are concerned about meeting housing needs for low-income people. There are other people, or maybe some of the same, who are saying, but there's neighborhood issues, and those need to be balanced as well. We don't need to solve that. We just need to agree that those are two needs that need to be addressed through whatever this plan is.
I want to spend this little time we have, just visioning a future. And if I think about my future and where I live, I don't want to live somewhere where there isn't housing for all.
I think this is really good that we're trying to resolve this really difficult problem of our area.
We can keep talking that, or we can go into some action planning and find out what people want to start working on, including the housing issues.
As in most Future Search conferences, the participants acknowledge their differences and choose to work together on common ground. Sitting in stakeholder groups, they begin to develop action plans, formulating short-term as well as long-term goals. Finally, task forces are formed to accomplish specific goals. As these new groups begin their work, many plans are formulated that will be realized in the year ahead.
And we want to engage the conversation around a future search with respect to the issue of diversity.
And we were talking about doing an employment future search in Watsonville to take a look at the options.
Building community house in Santa Cruz on River Street, and Paul is hoping to get 10 churches involved there.
We have $10,000. Bill wants $10,000. We're working on a program under the grant program that this will help people who have very inadequate housing to move into better housing. Hopefully we'll meet.
Following the conference, the Community Foundation started a newsletter seeking to involve all county residents. People were invited to join existing task forces and to start new projects. Many of the creative ideas that took root in the Future Search have now become a reality. Having come together around housing, residents discovered that they could act together on a wide range of shared concerns. Tony Hill, Simba Kenyatta, Leola Lapides, and Bob Culbertson have developed diversity training for individuals and organizations. In March 1995, 2 weeks after flooding devastated the area, Bob Dwyer and Joe Fahey initiated a future search called Bridging the Past and Future Economies of the Pajaro Valley. A new citizens organization, the Pajaro Valley Corps, was created to employ displaced workers to clean up flood damage. Other task forces began work on job creation, business expansion, beautification of downtown Watsonville, and arts and literacy education. Jerry Hernandez formulated and initiated a project to make downtown Watsonville a regional Latino market, rebuilding a devastated and dying downtown area. Bob Culbertson initiated a program for greater diversity in the state park system through a scholarship program for the Junior Lifeguard and Ranger Explorers summer recreational programs. As for affordable housing in Santa Cruz County, Dan Krieg and Bill Watt initiated a $10,000 rental assistance fund for the local Families in Transition program. Steve Salomon and other Santa Cruz County citizens initiated a fundraising plan to increase the Farm Worker Housing Loan Fund from $250,000 to $350,000. And Bonnie Bell, Norman Schwartz, and Arnie Fishman began work on a $5.5 million, 36-unit, low-income housing project in Scotts Valley.
For me, did the Future Search work? No question about it. It provided, I think, a very living model of democracy